Hi, I'm Lisa. I am with the SHARE project here in Haywood County, and we have been doing a series of interviews talking about our SHARE project. SHARE stands for Spreading Hope and Awareness and Removing the Epidemic Stigma. In each of the interviews, like I've said before, we're kind of trying to hit on each one of those words. Spreading hope, spreading awareness, and removing the stigma. Today we are hitting on all three, like so often times in these interviews. We're spreading hope in that there is hope for recovery. We're spreading awareness of a treatment facility, of a organization that helps people that are suffering with substance use disorder and addiction. And of course, we're talking about substance use disorder and addiction. So we are doing our part to help destigmatize addiction. Today I am with Penelope Rollins and Brittany Burnett. They are both with Meridian Behavioral Health. Meridian Behavioral Health. This is kind of a follow-up to the interview that I did with Trevor Herman back about a month ago. He told me about another department, if you will, of Meridian, and that is the Linkage to Care department. You may recall that if you've watched that interview. And we're going to have them tell us more about that, what that involves, what that is about, who that service is. But I do want them to tell us a little bit about themselves first. Not only just kind of some personal, what got you started in this field, but also are you from here, family, those kinds of things. If you have any history yourself with substance use, is that what got you started? Those kinds of things. So whoever wants to go first, just kind of take it away and give us just a brief little history of yourself. Okay?
Sure. Like I said, I'm Brittany Burnett, and I am a peer support specialist, which means that I have lived experience. So peer support specialists can either have lived experience with mental health or addiction, and I have lived experience with mental health. I got into this field because when I was in elementary school, I had a really amazing counselor that helped me through my own traumas and things like that. And so as soon as elementary school hit, I knew what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to work in this field. And so that's kind of how I ended up doing this kind of work, and later on learned about peer support and thought it was the perfect fit. So that's kind of how I got started. Yeah.
What kind of background does it take to be a peer support specialist? Do you have to have any special training or anything like that yourself?
Yeah, so the first piece of it is that you have to be in recovery.
Okay.
So the benefit of peer support is that you have someone that has walked a similar path or has similar experiences as you when you're working with someone. And so you want to be in recovery so you can share that piece of it, like what you've learned, what's been helpful, things like that. So you have to be in recovery for about a year, and that can look really different. Like with addiction, it can look different than mental health. Like I will still be, have my own mental health symptoms and things like that. So it's not black and white. It's kind of what recovery looks like to the person. But that's the first piece, is to be in recovery for a year. And then you will do a 40-hour training that Via Health provides locally. Once you do that, you do 20 extra hours on your own, and then you are certified. And you get recertified every 2 years.
Okay, excellent. Good to know. Okay, Penelope.
Well, I am Penelope. I am from New Hampshire, and I have lived here since 2007, and I've worked for Meridian the whole time minus 1 year when I worked somewhere else, but I came back. And my training is, I have a master's degree in transpersonal psychology, and through Meridian I've become a certified alcohol and addictions counselor, I think they call that. So every 2 years I have to take continuing education, and I've been a certified counselor since 2009. And I came to this field through being the adult child of an alcoholic, make that 2 alcoholics, And when my family and my husband's family went into treatment, various members of each family, we went to a family week where they informed my particular family that my parents were alcoholics, which was news to me. So that's when I began to learn about codependence, which is what happens in dysfunctional families. The children, what they learn from their dysfunctional parents is what they carry into their adulthood, and affects their ability to either become addicts, alcoholics, or codependents, or all three. So that was the beginning of my recovery, because I went on to make mistakes in my relationships through the things that I learned through codependence. And codependence just means you learn dysfunctional behavior from dysfunctional people. Not that they weren't good people, but because of what their illness was, you learn to adapt to them. And basically what you learn as a child is you might learn how to take care of them, or you might learn how to avoid them. And then when you're an adult, you repeat that until you go into recovery.
Right.
So that my career started back in 2003, and I didn't really know this was the field I was going to go into. It just kept on evolving into that, and that's what it's been at Meridian this whole time.
Okay. So tell me then more about what your positions are at Meridian. You two work together, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So tell me what your positions are, and then if you would, a little bit about what that involves, kind of what your day looks like, and then we'll talk more about the actual linkage to care as well. So what does your day look like, Britt?
So I actually wear several hats. One of them being I am the team lead of Timely Linkage to Care.
Okay.
And so I'm the peer lead of Haywood County's Meridian. So I supervise all of our peer support specialists at Meridian.
Okay.
I am over a program called the ACE program, which is assisting in community engagement. And so it's kind of similar, it's got the similar goal that TLC has, but we meet folks and try to engage folks that might not have an easier time coming to the office every day. We do a lot of case management. We try to, do a lot of different things. And then I also am over a peer bridger program, which is also very similar to Timely Linkage to Care, but isn't focused on addiction. The peer bridger program is to kind of help folks that are transitioning from being on the inpatient unit at Haywood Regional Hospital and discharging back to outpatient services and trying to help bridge that gap.
Okay.
So my day can look different depending on the day and depending on the hat that I have. But it's usually I'll use a recent example is we have someone that was referred to both of our teams, and so trying to do some outreach and try to find this person, and we're trying to really explore where something kind of fell through the cracks and try to see how can we address that piece where this person kind of fell through the cracks, and how do we get them and support them and problem solve and kind of sending people out into the community to try to find them. We do a lot of community outreach and can go to if we know if there's a homeless camp, sometimes we go to the homeless camp and see who's there and see if we can engage them, something like that. So it looks different depending on the day. It depends on what's going on.
Right, and it's good to hear that you go to them as well. So they don't just have to find you, which we will talk more about how they find you, but they don't have to come to you first, so you're actually reaching out, which seems very appropriate.
Yes. One of the biggest barriers that I have learned working in a rural area is we do not have transportation in Haywood County. And so a lot of folks, if they don't have transportation, there's no way to really get them engaged and help them. And so being able to, that's kind of what the ACE team and TLC kind of allows us to do, is to go to them and you know, try to, because even if they have phones, like sometimes their phones don't have service in Haywood County. I'm sure there's lots and lots of like kind of zones that they don't have service or they don't have a phone, and so really trying to like get to the person and be really assertive is really is a big part of what we do.
Okay, Penelope?
So my day, not so complicated, because I have one role now, which is the TLC team, I call it, because part-time Brittany or another of our team members will also work with me. So I coordinate with the health department, who is the administrator of the grant that's paying for TLC. And that administrator does a lot of purchasing for the care packages that I distribute to the people that I meet with. And the care package is toiletries, sleeping bags, tents, food, drinks, anything that we find is a need. So every day of the week I go to where the open door lunch van meets up in the parking lot of the church. And there I help out serving food, and also the people who are working on the open door van are telling people who I am, and I'm telling people who I am, so I'm distributing some of the care packages and making connections with people and offering also Narcan, which is an interrupter of an opioid overdose. So that happens every day. And then the rest of the time, I'm fielding referrals that so far are coming in from the Haywood Regional Emergency Room and from the Sheriff's Department, from Meridian, and from the community at large. And as soon as I can, I make a phone call and try to reach out to this person, and if I can't reach them by phone, then I will go to their address if I can get there. Some of them are in places where I can't get because the road's impassable, for instance. And then my job from there is to assess their needs and try to work with wherever they are in their process. Now, some people are taken to the hospital. The Sheriff's Department's reports, most everybody goes to the hospital, so I can't see them there yet. So I have to wait till they get home, a day or 4 days later. And then I will do an assessment of their needs and see, really my job is to figure out where they are in their process of recovery. Which is a real challenge.
I can imagine, yes, and I imagine every single one's completely different.
It is. Some people have run into the woods after their overdose and I can't find them. Some of them don't give their correct phone numbers, and some of them are eager to take the next step.
And could you give us a percentage on that at all? I mean, would you say the majority are eager, the majority are not?
The majority are not.
Yeah.
Partly though, I think that if in time we could get to the scene of the incident sooner, for instance, if EMS would let me go with them, because there are teams like that all over the state.
Yes.
And
sure
then you're right there in the moment, because the nature of addiction is because of the instant gratification of the drug or the alcohol, you're competing with that. So if they're having a traumatic incident, you have their attention for a little while, and the family members. So it would be better if I could be right there.
Yeah, and I think that stigma also really kind of plays into that, because one of the, I mean, again, like we get our referrals from the sheriff's office or things like that when they have like an overdose response, something like that, and I think they have their guards up, right? Like you have this person that they don't know that's coming and might not necessarily know that, like, we're not here to pressure you to be sober or we don't have these expectations. We just want you to know that we're here to, you know, meet you wherever you are and to support you. But the stigma kind of doesn't support that. Like, it sends a different message that I think a lot of folks that are struggling kind of naturally are going to have their guards up, because they're going to not feel like they can trust people, and that, you know.
And they're looking at them.
And law enforcement shows up. So there's that.
Yeah.
But there are teams that have case managers and peers and med techs and case workers and social workers that show up and that maybe after everybody's left and they haven't gone to the hospital, you could talk to the family, or you could talk to that person
Yep,
who had
that
the incident.
post-overdose
Yeah,
response
support.
team, which
Yeah,
is
exactly.
as close as Buncombe County.
Yes.
So
It is.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's a much more immediate contact.
Mhm. I think
At
we'll
that
probably
very
work
vulnerable
into that.
time. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. What is the, and maybe you don't know the answer to this, but what is the stumbling block to that? What is there just not somebody in place, a team, an organization that is, would be filling that particular thing, or is there not money?
Oh, I think
Or-
there's money. I think that what it amounts to is there are so many grants out there that Meridian just probably needs to write for that grant,
Right.
because
Somebody does. Yeah.
the trainings that I've been to, most of them are grant funded or they're community funded, and it just is a matter of the community and the grant and the provider to come together. So I really think it's only a matter of time.
Yeah, good. That's
Because
good to hear.
everybody is hearing about how it's working.
Yes. Yeah.
All of
now
us in the
now the
field.
history is there.
Yeah,
Yes,
we're
it's
going
proven
into
itself.
conferences and the people in the field are talking about how successful they are, and it's only a matter of time, really.
Yeah.
Because we are in an epidemic
Yeah.
of overdoses.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm optimistic about it.
Yeah. Well, that's good. That's good to hear. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so let's see. You've hit a lot of the questions I had already. You answered a lot of them. Okay, so you've talked about the referrals. You go to see them. Okay, so now what if somebody comes to you? Maybe court ordered, possibly something. They come to you. They're looking to get into some kind of recovery program. Okay, so they come to the door. The front door, Trevor referred to in his interview, and there was a term for that. The education.
It's the Recovery Education Center.
Okay, so that's kind of the beginning. Where does the linkage to care come in the order of things, or does it even, or is it? Are you the beginning point for a lot of people? They found you through certain things. Tell me about that.
Yeah, so the cool thing about the TLC program is that most of the other programs that Meridian does, you have to start by going through that Recovery Education Center, that open door, and you'll get an assessment, and at that time they will kind of figure out like where do we send referrals, what do we get you connected with, things like that. So that is something that typically you have to do for any program that's in Meridian. However, the linkage to care, we don't necessarily like to serve you in TLC alone.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to do an assessment. We can meet with you. So if someone calls us, like we've got our flyers out, like anywhere we could think of, we've got our flyers out. If someone calls us and says, hey, I'm interested, I could use help with XYZ, they don't have to go through a bunch of hoops. Like we can just go to them and at least, meet with them and see what's going on. Now at that point, we're gonna have to send them somewhere, like we start to bridge them into, do they wanna go to the REC? Do they wanna do like the, do they wanna go into treatment, detox, or do they just want a food box or something like that? So with TLC specifically, you don't have to go through all of those hoops. One of the things that we really want to try to do is remove as many barriers as we can to help it, because kind of like what Penelope was saying, we want to catch that person in that moment where they, they want to give this a try, they want to connect and things like that. So we can try to help hold that person until they do, if they're interested, get connected to another service.
So you're kind of the relationship part, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
You're building those relationships and that trust that you talked about a little bit there, too, before. And for some people, I imagine that takes a little bit of time, I would think. Yeah.
Now, for instance, last week, a couple of people were referred from the jail, and because they have peers in the jail and they have a social worker, they have some idea of what these people's needs are. And if they're people that have been there frequently, they really know them fairly well. So they asked me to set up assessments as soon as possible, because knowing them and knowing their need for medications and their need for housing and their need for employment. They wanted to get them as much help as possible directly from jail. So
Yes.
I was able to set up an assessment for somebody. Now, because this person is homeless, they may not show up. They may. And if basic needs are not met, an assessment is all well and good, but if they're homeless and don't have any food, they may not show up. It may not be a priority for them.
Yes.
But so, because they come out of the jail and they've had some contact with some professionals and some peers, we have a better idea of what they need.
Mm-hmm.
And we're trying to set up a kind of a structured, warm handoff
Yes.
that if they're ready, and they may or may not be, then that's their opportunity.
Right.
But
And is that pretty immediate then? You know, I mean,
I
are
was
you
able to-
able to get them
a
pretty
couple of
quickly when
days.
they come out? Okay.
they're
Yeah.
out on Saturday. We're not open for that on Saturday. I got them an assessment for Tuesday. But
Right.
they can walk in on Monday.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Because I've seen that. To me, that seems like another point of contact that could be narrowed, if you will. Because I know oftentimes that is where the overdose happens when they get out of
Right.
jail.
Mm-hmm.
So and can happen pretty quickly. So it seems as though and again, it's also so hard to do. But I guess if they've established some of those relationships in the beginning, that at least helps that to some extent.
yeah, especially when they're in jail and they're more open and more vulnerable. They are having time to be sober, to do some thinking. So then they are more likely to be open, at least initially,
Yeah.
to services. Also coming out of the hospital because they've had treatment, they've had some time, had some medication, had some counseling. Those people tend to be more open because it's fresh.
Right. Now you're not allowed to go into the hospital. Did you
Well,
say
it's
that?
not so much not allowed, because of HIPAA, they have to have agreed
Oh, of course.
to a referral
Yes.
to us. And we
Okay.
have that form and it's there with the
Got
hospital.
it.
And if that person signs it, then I could go in. I
Yeah.
have been in once. No, twice I've been in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you have a relationship with like counselors in the hospital?
We're
that
developing
they-
those.
Okay.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then her peer bridger program is
Mhm.
also developing.
Yeah, that's actually where we've been able to get some referrals to the TLC program through the Peer Bridger program because I get the information about who's on the unit and who might this make sense for, who TLC might make sense for. And so that's been really helpful because we have one of our staff, one of our peer support specialists is on the inpatient unit at the hospital every day.
Okay.
And so they get to know the person and see what's going on and seeing because if they're discharged and anyone that goes to the hospital inpatient wise for mental health or addiction are scheduled with a hospital discharge appointment to continue that treatment that they got at the hospital.
Okay.
And so if they have been discharged to Meridian, I can send referrals to my other team, my other hat,
Right.
and things like that. And so if I catch somebody that is in Haywood County and might not necessarily be referred to Meridian, or maybe they're not interested in follow-up, which can happen, we can at least refer them to the TLC program for them to just at least have a check-in, hey, we're here, if they need Narcan, give them Narcan, things like that. And having our kind of presence on the unit helps keeps it fresh in the minds of the social workers that are on the unit, and they can get those consents and things signed because we're kind of there and we can say, hey, can you,
Yeah.
it sounds like they'd be really great for this program, you want to see if they want to sign a release or something like that. So
Coming out of the BHU or the emergency room.
BHU.
That's behavioral health unit on the
Oh,
6th floor.
Got it. Okay. Okay.
Or the ER, or as they call it now, the
Right.
ED. There's social workers in there too.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they can refer from both areas.
Right. Got it. Okay. What are some of your referrals? What that you would refer to? Do you have some you know, or do you try to keep it pretty in-house to Meridian? I mean, would you refer somebody, well, you said about detox, so I would assume, you know, like ADACT or something like that. What are some of your other networks, if you will, that you might refer off to?
Yeah.
Somebody wanted medicated assisted treatment, or do you have that in-house yourself and those kinds of things?
Yeah, so it depends on the person. Like, we don't ever want to like pressure someone like, you can be at Meridian and that is your option. So we give them the options, especially if there's more than one. Like with medicated assistant treatment, there are multiple options, Meridian being one of them.
Yes.
And so I've created, thanks to Penelope collecting it, I've created a like a spreadsheet of every referral, like every resource we've found so far in Haywood County.
I'd like a copy of that.
I sent it.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
I can resend it.
Okay, actually, I remember that being connected. I did see that. I didn't realize that was the comprehensive list. So,
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know if it's everything, but it's what we've collected so far.
Okay. Okay.
But so there's several kind of medicated assistant treatment options there that we can kind of go to, because sometimes places have wait lists, which again, that wait list piece is really where we can lose people.
Yeah.
And so we've got those options that we can connect people to. And ADACT, you know, the Balsam Center, which is another inpatient unit that people can go to.
Swing recovery.
There's lots of places, like as far as like the treatment piece, that we can refer out to. Or in-house would be our SEIOP program, which is our substance abuse intensive outpatient program, which has such great success rate. When we can get someone set up in that program is really great to see. So we have that in-house, as well as like our other services that Trevor's probably talked about.
He did reference some of those. Yeah.
And if people aren't ready for that kind of level of treatment, we give people a sheet of NA and AA meetings.
Okay.
And
Okay.
and some of those are held in churches, and so we do address that issue too, because if you find somebody who has a spiritual background, we can certainly recommend that they go back to church, or they go to the meetings in the church.
Celebrate recovery.
Yeah, celebrate recovery. Yep. And there is the Bethel House, and there is Pathways.
Yeah.
So if they qualify to go to Pathways, there is some religious or spiritual component to that. And the Bethel House is a place where people can stay during the day, shower, do laundry. They have to leave in the evening, but there's a place for them to be during the day.
Yes.
And they will get lunch from the open door. So those are resources. Now, if worst case scenario, and they say it was winter and they couldn't get into Pathways, in the past, before COVID, we would drive people to Asheville to the shelters.
Okay.
Because there are a lot.
Yeah.
If you get there by a certain time, you might get in.
Yeah.
And then you have all the resources there.
Okay. What else have I missed, you guys? Have I missed anything else of great importance? Anything that you can think of you want to make sure people know about Meridian and the Linkage to Care program? And
yeah, I think one of the things, and I think we've talked about it, but I want to just make sure that we really name it, is that not like we want to meet someone where they're at. So even if someone is referred to us and they want to continue to use, we're not going to say, well, you know, okay, we'll call us when you're ready to be sober. Like, we are really here to meet folks wherever they might be and keep them alive.
yes.
Like, at least, you know, make it as possible as, you know, to do that so that, you know, things might change down the road. And that's not just with the Linkage to Care program, but with Meridian in general. One of the things that I really love about Meridian, and why I've stayed with Meridian for as long as I have, is that, again, we're going to meet someone where they're at. Just because they are not in a place of wanting to be sober, or are in crisis frequently, or whatever the thing may be, we're not here to force them to be in one place if they're not in that stage of change. And so if someone's not like ready to make all these jumps, I don't want them to feel like they're going to come to Meridian and we're going to say, all right, you know, here's all the things that you need to do. It's really like, what are you wanting to pay attention to right now? Like, what do you want to work on in this moment? Yeah.
And we do call that harm reduction.
I was going to say, I was thinking
That's
that. I was going to say that's the very definition of harm reduction.
And we do work in concert with the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition.
Right.
Because they're already on the street and they do coordinate with us. They also get the sheriff's report of the officers going out. And sometimes that's the best we can do is harm reduction.
Yeah. Well, and you said it well, you know, I mean, addiction is treatable, but not if you're dead.
Exactly.
You know, so you got to keep them alive until they're ready to get to that place of seeking some further help. So,
And I would pose the question that people like yourself who have lived experience and loss, if you have anything to let us know about what you feel like was missing when you needed help, that would be helpful, because it just seems like we make connections, we offer people help, but if they're not ready to say, I need help, I want help, what can we do next to make it possible for them to ask for help? Yeah. Is there something else we can do? Because we need to know.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. How do you define your successes in a day? What keeps you going day after day? What makes a successful day for you?
For me, it's planting a seed. Yeah, if I can make a connection with somebody, look them in the eyes, make a connection, let them know who I am and that I'm here, I feel like I planted a little seed.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said.
Yeah. And that's exactly right. Like there's these big big moments, right? Like someone, you know, has been sober for a year or whatever. We have these big successes, but there's also these little successes that we get to see every day, and these seeds. And sometimes just there are some days that are really hard, and you feel like you've gotten nothing accomplished. However, one of the things that I define as a success is that I sat with this person and I didn't turn away from them. And even if we sat and it was hard and we didn't get the outcome that we wanted, I was there and I didn't kind of just say, look, I don't know what to tell you. Yeah. We were there for this person to know that we care.
And for most people, if they're in that position, they probably don't have many people that will sit with them.
Yeah.
So just sitting with somebody like that is doing something above and beyond. So
yeah, and the cool thing about being, you know, Penelope's been with Meridian for a long time, and I've been with Meridian for not as long, but for a long time. And I've gotten to see those seeds kind of grow and plant and see really cool successes happen. That, you know, you saw this person 3 years ago, and you might have like spent just a little time with that person, and then you see them 3 years and they are sober, they're wanting to do their peer support, and that little glimmer of just treating that person with respect and that you care, you know, fostered something really cool. And we see that a lot. And so, yeah.
That's great. That's great. What would be, this is kind of one question that I've been asking everybody at the end. What would be, you know, if you had a magic wand, let's say, what would be one thing, you know, you both have been in the field now fairly good amount of time, that you would like to see change, more of, something we're lacking in the area that you would, you know, what would be the one thing, if you could change one thing or better one thing in this area, what would that be? Or what's the biggest thing that's lacking, possibly? And that would be another way to phrase that question.
For me, it's housing. Because if you don't have basic needs met, if you don't have shelter, safe shelter, it's going to be very hard to pay attention to the rest of what you need to do. Because I think we do have sufficient mental health and substance abuse treatment here in this town between the providers and the hospitals and therapists and Appalachian and Meridian, I think it's
With
housing
that
for me.
basic need, yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I wouldn't want to be sober if I was sleeping under a bridge. That's the biggest theme that we see, and I think one thing that I would change that I think would ripple into lots of places like housing is the stigma.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like we're progressing.
Yeah.
I really do see a lot of change, but I think stigma and the
Yes.
assumption that people don't want help, or all of these different stories that we've created about folks that are struggling with addiction, folks that are homeless, like all these assumptions that are easy just to kind of toss away.
Yes.
Like, I think impacts and makes a ripple effect into what services are available. Because, you know, if someone comes into a service, like if an employee or a staff comes into a service and they already assume like this person is just here, you know, for a warm bed or for food or whatever, and if we're just assuming that they don't want help, that's going to impact how we treat that person.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I'd actually say that's probably more important than housing, really.
Well, I think it would impact all these different things, right? Like housing, like, you know, one of the things that happens is, one of the things that my ACE program does is when someone finally gets a voucher or gets a job or something, we try to help them with housing, they know that they're coming from pathways, or the landlord might, there's like on paper this person might not look right, like they might have a record, or like there's people that have trespassing record on their record because they're homeless and they have to find a place.
Yes.
So I think even just a landlord, like if a community as a whole and a landlord is looking at who they're going to give this apartment to, that stigma is going to play a role.
Absolutely.
And it creates this really unhelpful cycle. And so I think even, you know, when we look at the bigger picture, it can get really overwhelming. But I think if you're someone that this is really important to, just being really aware of how we talk about the folks that are struggling with addiction and about folks that are homeless, because it can model that to other people in our community, that can make those little changes too. But I think that plays a big role.
Absolutely.
Because
and we're talking about changing minds, really.
Yeah.
That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
That's what you're doing.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. That's our vision. Yep. Anything else? Any final message, ladies? Good information. Good information. Yes. Yes. All right. Anything else then?
No, I think we got it.
Thank you, ladies, very much. I appreciate your time this afternoon.